Two wounded men lie beside you, and you have less than 30 seconds to decide which one leaves Omaha Beach. The first is Eddie, your best friend, who is still awake enough to know that you are about to abandon him. The second is a stranger who cannot speak, cannot plead, and has never even told you his name. Eddie needs surgery that may already be too late, while the stranger will probably live if he reaches the ship now. A landing craft bucks in the surf behind you, as its crew shouts that they can take one more stretcher. Eddie closes his hand around your sleeve, and the stranger's pulse fades beneath your fingers. The litter bearers look at you because the medical bag on your shoulder makes this decision yours. One of them leans close enough to be heard above the gunfire and asks the question you will remember forever. Which one, Doc? A few hours earlier, the darkness beyond the landing craft seems large enough to hide an entire continent. You cannot see France, but you can hear artillery moving across it, like distant furniture dragged over a floor. Cold seawater pours over the ramp and circles the boots of men who have already been sick twice. You stand near the front with your medical bag pressed between your knees and one hand wrapped around a wet steel rail. The bag contains dressings, bandages, tourniquets, morphine syringes, scissors, safety pins, and less certainty than you carried into training. Nothing in training explained what happens when 10 men need the same 2 hands. Eddie is packed against your shoulder, pretending to study the closed ramp as if he can see through it. He has been talking since the transport ship, which means he is more afraid than he wants anyone to know. Then his identification tags slip from beneath his jacket and strike each other with a small metallic click. Eddie stops talking anyway. He pulls a narrow strip of tape from his pocket and winds it around the chain until the 2 tags cannot touch. You ask if the noise is getting on his nerves. He says he simply wants one thing on this boat to stay quiet. Those 2 pieces of metal carry his name, service number, blood type, and the faith he chose to list. They are meant to speak when he cannot. Eddie studies them for a moment, then asks what happens if an explosion takes both tags away. You tell him the army has forms for everything. He says that is not what he asked. You finally tell him that the tags exist, so no man has to disappear without a name. Eddie tucks them beneath his jacket and says, "You had better remember his name anyway." You promise that you will. It feels like an easy promise because dawn has not yet shown you what promises cost. The coxswain shouts that the beach is close, and every man begins checking equipment he has already checked 10 times. You touch the 2 tags under your own collar, then check the strap of your medical bag again. You have believed one thing since your first day as an aidman. If you reach a wounded man quickly enough, you can bring him back from the edge. Eddie grips your shoulder and tells you he will see you on the other side. You begin to answer, but machine gun rounds strike the water beyond the steel door before you can speak. The ramp drops into grey morning, and the first man in front of you falls before anyone takes a full step. For one frozen second, everyone behind him tries to move forward, while every nerve in your body demands that you move back. Then the men spill into the sea. The water is deeper than the briefing promised, and the weight of your bag pulls you sideways as your boots search for sand. Bullets enter the water as thin white lines and slow beneath the surface, close enough to look harmless. They are not harmless. A rifleman beside you loses his footing and disappears under a pack that suddenly weighs more than he does. You catch his shoulder strap, but another wave turns both of you toward the beach. You shove him toward shallower water and tell him to keep moving. There is no clear line to follow, and no officer standing upright long enough to point one out. You hear the first cry for a medic before your knees touch the sand. It comes from your left, where a soldier is waving from behind a steel obstacle. A second voice calls from the right, closer to the water, and suddenly weaker. You turn toward the weaker voice because that is what training tells you to do. The wounded man has been hit high in the leg, and bright blood pulses through the fingers he has clamped over it. You drop beside him, pull a tourniquet tight, and watch his face lose color before the bleeding finally slows. He says he cannot feel his foot. You tell him that feeling his foot is a problem for later. You drag him behind the nearest obstacle and press his own hands onto the dressing. Another soldier crawls close enough to take hold of him, and you tell them where the wounded are gathering near the shingle. The soldier asks if he will live. You say yes before you have enough information to know. The word steadies both of them, and for a moment, it steadies you. Move fast enough, and no voice has to go unanswered. Then you look back toward the man who called from the left. He is no longer waving. The tide pushes past his sleeve and withdraws without moving his arm. You start toward him anyway, but Eddie catches your harness as he stumbles out of the water. He points toward 3 men crouched behind a burned vehicle, one of them holding his abdomen with both hands. You look once more at the motionless sleeve, then crawl toward the men who are still moving. This is the first person you leave behind. You do not know his name. Easy Red has no front line that morning, only separate islands of men trying not to drown, bleed, or become visible. Smoke hides the cliffs, then thins just long enough to reveal concrete positions, firing down the length of the shore. Men from different companies land in the wrong sectors and begin following strangers because familiar leaders are missing. Each incoming boat brings more soldiers, and each outgoing wave carries loose helmets, broken packs, and things you refuse to identify. Your medical bag grows lighter with every man you touch. You bind a shoulder wound while another casualty grips the back of your jacket and begs you to turn around. You give morphine to a soldier whose leg has been shattered, pin the empty syrette to his collar, and warn the next aidman what you gave him. You crawl 10 yards to a man shouting for his mother and discover that the blood on his uniform belongs to someone else. You tell him to move inland if he can move, because walking wounded cannot occupy the hands needed by men who cannot crawl. Eddie keeps finding you through the smoke. He is not a medic, but he drags men by their webbing, carries dressings in his pockets, and remembers where you left the worst cases. Every time he appears, you feel the world become briefly smaller and more manageable. Near the shingle bank, wounded men lie shoulder to shoulder beneath the little protection offered by sand and stone. Some wait quietly because they believe silence will make the medics choose them. Others call each time you pass because they fear being forgotten more than they fear the pain. A litter team arrives from farther up the beach and asks which casualties should move first. You point to a man whose bleeding is controlled and whose breathing remains strong. When a bearer points to another soldier barely moving, you feel the dark stain beneath his jacket and choose the first man anyway. The motionless soldier opens his eyes as the litter moves away and whispers that he has a daughter. He asks whether the ship is close. You tell him it is closer than it was a minute ago. Another call rises from the beach, followed by another, until the word medic no longer sounds like a word. Eddie touches your shoulder and says you cannot die for a man who is already dead. You tell him no one gets called dead while he is still breathing. Eddie looks at the men along the shingle and asks how long you can keep believing that. You do not answer, because another explosion erases the question. The blast throws sand over everyone and leaves your ears ringing beneath a strange, padded silence. You crawl toward the cry and find a soldier folded beside the leg of a steel obstacle. His unit patch is unfamiliar, and the sea has washed most of the markings from his jacket. He is unconscious, but his breathing remains steady beneath the gunfire. Blood has soaked his trouser leg from a wound high in the thigh. You cut the fabric, tighten a tourniquet above the wound, and hold pressure until the flow becomes a slow seep. His pulse is fast, but it strengthens slightly after the bleeding stops. The metal edge of an identification tag shows beneath his collar. You reach for it, then hear Eddie shouting that another man is down behind you. There is no time to learn the stranger's name. You secure the dressing, wedge him above the rising water, and tie a strip of white bandage to the obstacle so you can find him again. You tell an uninjured rifleman nearby that this man needs the next litter going toward the boats. You turn back toward Eddie. He is helping 2 soldiers pull a wounded sergeant toward the shingle while shells walk closer across the beach. You wave for them to stay low. The mortar round lands before either of you can move. You wake on your side with sand inside your mouth, and no sound except a high note that seems to come from your skull. Then you see Eddie lying several yards away. The wounded sergeant is still crawling, but Eddie is not. You cross the distance on your knees and turn him carefully. His eyes open at once, and relief passes over his face when he recognizes you. There is shrapnel damage along his side, but the external bleeding is less severe than you expect. For half a second, that feels like good news. Then you touch his abdomen and feel the hard tension beneath his uniform. His skin is cold despite the exertion, his pulse is thin, and each breath stops before it becomes deep. Blood is collecting somewhere your hands cannot compress. He needs a surgeon, plasma, and time that the beach is not prepared to give him. You pack the visible wound and bind it, because doing nothing would mean admitting what you already understand. Eddie watches your face instead of your hands. He knows enough about you to read the truth you are trying to hide. He asks whether he is going home. You tell him that you are going to move him. He says that is also not what he asked. You slide an arm beneath his shoulders and drag him toward the shingle one painful foot at a time. He tries to help, but his legs fold beneath him and his breath becomes a quiet grunt against your collar. When you reach cover, he apologizes for being heavy. You tell him he has been a burden since England. The old rhythm returns for one sentence, and his mouth almost becomes a smile. Then he closes his eyes. You slap his cheek harder than you intend and tell him to look at you. He obeys, irritated, which gives you a hope you have not earned. A rifleman appears through the smoke, dragging the unconscious stranger by the shoulder straps. He says the water reached the man's boots, and he remembered your order. You check the tourniquet and find that the bleeding remains controlled. The stranger is pale and weak, but his airway is clear, and the bleeding remains controlled. If he reaches surgical care soon, his body has a real chance to survive the blood he has lost. Eddie's pulse is fading for a different reason. Moving him may kill him, yet leaving him on the beach may do the same thing more slowly. A landing craft noses toward the shallows, already crowded with wounded men picked up farther down the sector. Its ramp is crowded with wounded soldiers, and two litter bearers struggle through the surf toward you. One shouts that the boat cannot hold position under fire. They can carry one more man to the ramp before it backs away. Another craft may come in 5 minutes, or 30, or not until the tide changes the entire beach. The bearers set down their empty litter and look at the two casualties. You begin assessing them again, because repetition feels safer than choosing. Eddie is conscious, which makes him look like the better chance to anyone who cannot feel his pulse. The stranger is silent, which makes him look closer to death than he really is. Your training tells you to ignore appearances and judge what immediate evacuation can change. The boat can carry the stranger to blood, surgery, and a future that is still waiting for him. The same boat may carry Eddie only to an operating table he will never reach alive. The difference is not certainty. It is only probability, and probability feels obscene when one of the numbers knows your name. The coxswain shouts from the ramp, and a burst of gunfire cuts the water beside him. One bearer asks how bad Eddie is. You say he is bleeding inside. The bearer looks at the stranger and asks whether the leg wound is controlled. You say it is. Eddie hears every word. His hand searches across the sand until it finds your sleeve. The taped identification tags press against his chest beneath the hand that is holding you. 2 wounded men, 1 litter, and a decision no bandage can repair. Which one, Doc? You point to the stranger. The bearers move immediately, because hesitation belongs to the person who gives the order, not the men who must carry it. Eddie's fingers tighten around your sleeve. He does not tell you that you made the right choice. He looks directly at you and says the only thing that could make leaving harder. Do not go. You tell him another boat will come. He says your name. You tell him you will return before he has time to miss you. He says your name again, more quietly, because both of you know the beach has already made liars of better men. The bearers lift the litter and start toward the water. You try to rise, but Eddie will not release your sleeve. For one impossible moment, You consider pulling the stranger off the litter and placing Eddie there instead. Eddie would know, and so would you. You place your hand over his and remove his fingers one at a time. His grip is weak enough that this should be easy. It is the hardest thing you have done all morning. You leave your last unopened field dressing beside him, although a dressing cannot reach the wound that is killing him. Then you turn and follow the litter into the surf. Each step toward the boat increases the distance between you and the man who asked you to stay. The stranger's breathing changes halfway to the ramp. His jaw slackens, and the sound in his throat tells you his airway is beginning to close. You stop the bearers, clear his mouth, lift his jaw, and feel air move again. You keep one hand beneath the stranger's jaw while the others carry him forward. At the ramp, a sailor reaches down and asks what happened to him. You report the wound, the tourniquet, the blood loss, and the fact that no morphine was given. The sailor asks for his name. Only then do you pull the metal tag from beneath the stranger's collar. Sand fills the stamped letters, so you wipe them with your thumb until they become readable. James Mercer. You say the name aloud, and the sailor repeats it. The stranger is no longer the better chance, or the leg wound near the obstacle. He is James Mercer, and somewhere beyond this beach, that name belongs inside other people's lives. Then the ramp begins to rise. You step backward into the water before the craft can carry you away with him. The sailor grips your arm and shouts that there is room. You pull free because the man you left behind is still on the beach. The landing craft reverses through the surf, carrying James Mercer toward a ship where your decision may become a life. You turn toward shore, where the same decision may already have become a death. The journey back should take less than a minute. It feels longer than the entire crossing from England. Smoke has shifted across the beach and hidden the patch of shingle where Eddie was lying. The tide has climbed, carrying debris into paths that were open moments ago. You call Eddie's name once. The gunfire answers. You call again and follow the memory of a burned vehicle, a torn pack, and a dark line in the stones. There are more casualties at the shingle than there were when you left. For several seconds, every wet uniform looks like his. Then you see the strip of tape around a chain at the throat of a man lying on his side. Eddie has not moved. You drop beside him and place 2 fingers against his neck. You know before you touch him, but your hands insist on completing the examination. There is no pulse beneath your fingers and no breath against the back of your hand. His eyes are partly open, facing the route you took toward the sea. You close them and tell him that you came back. The words arrive too late to be a promise and too early to become a prayer. The dressing you left lies open beside him, proof that someone tried to help after you went. You also know that no medic on this beach could have stopped what was happening inside him. That knowledge does not feel like forgiveness. It feels like another fact you will be forced to carry. You lift the identification tags from beneath his jacket. The tape is wet, but it has held, and the 2 pieces of metal have remained silent exactly as he wanted. His name is still stamped there. Edward Thomas Hale. You read it even though you have known every letter for months. On the landing craft, he asked what would happen if both tags disappeared. Now you understand that metal can identify a body, but it cannot contain a man. It cannot record his bad jokes, the way he kept returning through smoke, or the fact that he was afraid and came ashore anyway. It cannot say that his last request was simply not to die alone. You separate one tag from the shorter chain and leave the other beneath his collar. The second closes inside your fist, waiting to be passed to the men who will record the dead. Eddie will not become an unknown soldier. The army will have his tag, and you will have everything the tag cannot hold. For the first time since the ramp opened, you sit without moving. The beach continues around you as if nothing important has happened. Riflemen gather near an opening in the wire. Engineers pull equipment from the water, and litter teams search for men whose chances can still change. Somewhere above the beach, American soldiers are beginning to climb through draws and over the bluffs. The invasion is moving forward. Eddie is not. You look toward the sea and imagine James Mercer's litter reaching a ship. Perhaps a surgeon will stop the bleeding you could only slow. War offers no receipt, proving that sacrifice purchased the future you intended. It only takes the decision and leaves you with the uncertainty. Your medical bag rests beside your knee, nearly empty now. There are 2 dressings left, 1 morphine syringe, several safety pins, and a pair of scissors coated with sand. At dawn, you believed the bag contained an answer for every man who called. Now you know it contains only time, and never enough of it. A hand touches your boot. You look down and find a young soldier half buried against the shingle, several feet away. There is blood along his shoulder, and each breath pulls one side of his chest more weakly than the other. His fingers tighten around the leather of your boot because he does not have the strength to reach higher. Doc, am I going to die? The answer you gave the first wounded man in the surf rises automatically to your mouth. You could say no and give him a few seconds of borrowed certainty. You could say you do not know and call it honesty. Instead, you move beside him and ask his name. He looks confused, as if names belong to introductions and not to places like this. Then he tells you, Samuel Brooks. You repeat it slowly enough for him to hear every part. Samuel Brooks. His eyes remain on yours, and his breathing becomes a little less frantic. You tell him that you are going to examine his chest and that he must keep looking at you. You do not promise that he will live. You promise only that he will not disappear while your hands are on him. Eddie's tag is still clenched in your left fist. You place it inside your jacket, open the medical bag, and reach for one of the final dressings. Beneath your collar, your own 2 identification tags strike each other with a faint metallic click. For an instant, you are back inside the landing craft before dawn, listening to Eddie make one small thing quiet. Then Samuel says your title again, softer this time. You lean closer before he has to call twice. You cannot save every man on Omaha Beach. You cannot make the correct choice feel merciful, and you cannot bring Eddie back by wishing you had chosen differently. What you can do is remember that every wound has a name attached to it. You say Samuel's name once more, press the dressing into place, and begin again.